The ceiling fan stopped with a shudder, and the whole neighborhood fell silent so suddenly that I could hear my own heartbeat. It was the hottest afternoon of the summer, the kind of heat that makes the air feel heavy enough to drown in. Then came the knock at my door. When I opened it, my neighbor stood there in the dim hallway, her face pale with worry, sweat clinging to her temples, and a single sentence changed everything. She asked me to stay with her until the power returned. I thought she was afraid of the dark. I had no idea she was really afraid of being alone. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and the power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the Kindness Project. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to life. My name is Rowan Mercer, and until that afternoon, I knew almost nothing about the woman who lived across the courtyard from me. Her name was Mercer Vale. We had exchanged polite nods for nearly a year, traded small favors, and once shared an awkward smile while carrying groceries up the stairs. She seemed private, the sort of person who moved through the building quietly, as if trying not to leave a trace. I was 36, worked remotely restoring old photographs, and spent most days alone. After my father died and my engagement ended within the same year, solitude had become less of a choice and more of a habit. The blackout swallowed the entire block. Phones lost signal, air conditioners died, and the usual hum of modern life vanished. Outside, children complained, dogs barked, and somewhere in the distance a car alarm wailed and then gave up. Mercer's apartment was hotter than mine because the afternoon sun poured directly through her west-facing windows. She held a battery lantern in one hand and looked embarrassed for asking. I almost said no. I had become skilled at protecting my loneliness. But something in her eyes reminded me of the nights after my father's funeral when silence felt dangerous. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Curtains were drawn to keep the heat out, and the rooms glowed amber from the lantern. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa while sweat rolled down our necks and the city baked outside. At first we talked about ordinary things, the blackout, the weather, the aging plumbing in the building. Then the conversation drifted into the strange territory people enter when darkness hides their faces. She told me she had moved here after a difficult divorce and worked from home editing audiobooks. She confessed that she hated thunderstorms, elevators, and empty houses. I admitted that I still listened to my father's voicemail messages sometimes because I was afraid of forgetting the sound of his voice. The heat softened our defenses. Hours passed without either of us noticing. As daylight faded, the apartment grew darker and strangely intimate. We lit candles and opened the windows, hoping for a breeze that never came. From the courtyard came the murmur of neighbors gathering outside, but Mercer did not want to join them. She seemed calmer with me there, and that realization unsettled me. I had spent so long believing I was no longer necessary to anyone. She disappeared briefly into the bedroom and returned wearing a loose cotton robe, apologizing for changing into something cooler. I looked away quickly, embarrassed by my own awareness of her. This was not a romantic evening, it was a survival of heat and darkness. Yet beneath that practical truth, something gentler was taking root. Around sunset we carried chairs to the open window. The sky turned copper, and for a few precious minutes a breeze slipped through the building. Mercer closed her eyes and let the wind touch her face. In that moment she looked less like a neighbor and more like someone who had been carrying an invisible weight for a very long time. Then she told me the real reason she had asked me to stay. A year earlier, during another blackout in another apartment, her former husband had left after a violent argument. She had spent the night alone, terrified, convinced he would return. He never did, but the darkness had stayed with her. Since then, every power outage reopened that fear. Listening to her, I felt ashamed of how easily I had judged her silence. We rarely know the storms hidden behind closed doors. Night settled fully over the neighborhood. We ate crackers and fruit by candlelight and told stories from childhood. She laughed for the first time, a warm, surprised laugh that transformed her face. I told her about restoring a photograph of my grandparents dancing during a blackout in 1954, and she said maybe darkness sometimes forces people to see each other more clearly. Near midnight the heat became unbearable. She excused herself to splash water on her face. I remained by the window, watching lightning flicker far beyond the city. The apartment was so quiet that I could hear water running in the bathroom. And then the lights came back. The refrigerator roared awake, the ceiling fan spun violently, and every lamp in the apartment burst into brightness. I turned instinctively toward the hallway. Morel stood there, frozen in the sudden light. The robe she had been wearing was gone. A towel hung loosely from one hand, and shock flooded her face before either of us could move. For a suspended second the room felt unreal, as if the electricity had illuminated not her body but her vulnerability. I looked away immediately and stepped toward the window, my face burning. What happened next mattered far more than what I had seen. I heard her retreat quickly into the bedroom and close the door. Shame filled the apartment like smoke. I realized she would think I had stayed for the wrong reason, that every conversation, every shared confession, would now feel contaminated. My chest tightened with panic. I had lost enough people already. I could not bear to lose this fragile trust that had formed in the dark. I quietly switched off the nearest lamp and sat facing the window, giving her privacy even though the lights remained on. Minutes passed. The fan whirred overhead. Somewhere downstairs neighbors cheered that the power had returned. When she finally emerged, fully dressed, her eyes were red. She looked not angry but humiliated. I kept my gaze lowered and spoke softly, telling her I was sorry the lights had startled us both. I told her I respected her and would leave immediately if that made her feel safer. She sat down slowly, leaving a careful distance between us. After a long silence, she whispered that no one had ever looked away before. That sentence broke something open inside me. She explained that during her marriage, privacy had never been respected. Doors were opened without knocking, boundaries ignored, embarrassment mocked. My simple act of turning away had felt, to her, like an act of kindness so unfamiliar that it frightened her. We talked until dawn. The electricity hummed around us, but the real illumination had already happened. She spoke about rebuilding her life one cautious step at a time. I spoke about hiding from grief by pretending I needed no one. When the first pale light entered the windows, the apartment no longer felt like a place of fear. Over the weeks that followed, our friendship grew quietly. We drank coffee on the balcony in the mornings. I helped her carry boxes of audiobooks to the post office. She convinced me to attend a community picnic instead of spending another weekend alone. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden declarations, no cinematic embrace. What changed was simpler and far more powerful. Two lonely people began choosing each other's company. Months later, another storm knocked out the power for an hour. This time Morel knocked on my door with a lantern in her hand and a smile that reached her eyes. We sat together in the dark, not because she was afraid, but because neither of us wanted the other to sit alone. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the Kindness Project for more stories about compassion, healing, and second chances. Special request, comment, kindness brings light, if you believe a single respectful act can change someone's life forever. I used to think that the most important moment of that blackout was when the lights returned and revealed what she wasn't wearing. Now I know the truth. The most important moment was the second I chose to look away, because that was the moment she realized she was safe. Sometimes love does not begin with desire. Sometimes it begins with dignity. And sometimes, in the middle of a scorching summer blackout, the light that changes your life is not the one that comes from the ceiling. It is the light you offer another human being when they are at their most vulnerable.